So call me maybe. Boop, boop. Welcome back to another episode of Florida Man Friday. As always, I'm your host, Simon. Kevin writes for me. I read it. We learn all about what's going on in Florida. Probably some crazy shit. Let's jump in. There are some things that just stick with you forever, haunting you. For me, one of those things occurred during what was supposed to be a mundane trip to a record store. I had gone there to sell some boxes of CDs. Jesus Christ, this was the past. So I was just sitting in a chair playing on my phone while I waited for the employee to price out the boxes I had brought in. Playing Snake on your phone? Like, I don't imagine it was a smartphone if you're selling CDs, Kevster. And that's when I heard it, a conversation that has lived rent-free in my head for over a decade. Holy shit, what's this going to be? This is going to be good. Two other employees of, I wonder if there's, I got to pay attention to this. What lives rent-free in my head? What things do I keep returning back to and being like, oh yeah, I'll have a think about it. Maybe I'll have something next episode. Two other employees of the store were chatting with one another while stocking shelves near me. I was mostly able to ignore what they were talking about because I didn't really care, and then I heard a statement that defied all reason. One of the employees, without the slightest hint of irony, began talking about the unbridled genius of Carly Rae Jepsen, I don't know who that is, and how the song Call Me Maybe was pure brilliance. Wait, is that... So call me maybe, There's not pure brilliance. It's a pop song. So picture this, you're all set to launch your side hustle, or maybe you're an artist trying to showcase your portfolio. Look, whatever you're up to, Squarespace is going to be there when you need a website. Because, I mean, you could go make it yourself. You could learn HTML. What do people make websites in anymore? When I was at school, I was in computer club because I was extremely cool. And we were making websites in HTML. And I tell you, it was a massive hassle and they still looked bad. And that's not just because it's like 1990s website building. It's just because it's really hard and you have to be really good at it. And if you're not really good at it, you've got to pay someone like tens of thousands of pounds to like make a website that looks halfway good. No longer. And that's because Squarespace exists and it gets better all of the time. I've built my personal website on Squarespace. I think if you need a website, you should build it on Squarespace. It's just perfect. Perfection. They've got Squarespace Blueprint. It's a guided design system you pick from professionally curated layouts. Then it guides you through a process that lets you make it unique to a style that's totally you. And then also they've got other stuff like SEO tools so people can actually find your website, and Fluid Engine is a drag and drop editor, so a next generation drag and drop editor, I should say, which just makes making the website exactly how you want it without somehow ruining the design so it looks bad. It allows you to make a good looking website without knowing anything about design or coding or really anything. You can be a bit of an idiot and Squarespace will still make you a beautiful website. Plus you can have a store and there's Afterpay. So if you're in like certain regions, people can buy something and then pay for it later or some such. It's that's got to be fantastic for selling more stuff, doesn't it? When you're ready to take your project to the next level, head to squarespace.com for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/blaze to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain using the code Blaze. Thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring, and now back to today's video. Fun fact that I just discovered while writing this, I'd always assumed that Jepsen was a teeny bobber or something like that when the song came out, but she's basically the same age as me. She was near 30 when she wrote that song. So call me maybe. That's all I know. I suspect I'm starting to lose Simon with this reference to pop culture though, so it's time for me to circle back to Florida Man. While that conversation is what haunts me, or what haunts Florida Man is his inability to stop getting arrested. Kevin, what sort of introduction was this? This is just a personal anecdote, and then you've made the like weakest connection to Florida Man that I've ever seen. So, sticking with the Star Wars theme from last episode, for episode 6, Return of the Florida Man, we'll be... I don't get these Star Wars references, Kevster. We'll be looking at Florida men who were arrested for multiple times for the same crime. Florida Man impersonates officer twice in 1 week. How far would you go for $2? Or would you ski down K12 on a bicycle screaming, I want my $2 at John Cusack? I don't know what that reference is. I like John Cusack though, he's good. Probably not, but would you impersonate a US Marshal? The answer for all of you sane people watching should still be no, but for 60-year-old Florida man Leroy Stotelmeyer, it was a resounding yes. The toll to cross Hammock Dunes Bridge in Palm Coast was $2, but it was free for officers while they were on duty. For at least a month, Leroy flashed a fake US Marshal badge at the toll collectors whenever he crossed the bridge in order to avoid paying the toll. I kind of like it though, dude, but this is one of those things where it's like, I was going to tell a personal anecdote, but I won't. It's not about me. It's actually about a friend. But there's one of those things where it's like the reward that you get for the potential seriousness of the crime is so massively disproportionate. Like, impersonating an officer is a major crime. Saving $2 is a minor gain. The crime should be like somewhat equal with the risk. He may have continued to get away with this were it not for the fact that Leroy seemed to believe that US Marshals also aren't required to pay for groceries. Uh-oh. Leroy was caught stealing a fish fillet and some potatoes from a local Publix, at which point he told the loss prevention officer something about being a marshal. Wait, is that what the security guy's called? The loss prevention officer?
You'll pay for your crimes.
No, come on now. Oh, what the?
That's a little bit overblown, isn't it? Something about being a marshal, dropped the food, and walked out of the store. When the officer approached Leroy in the parking lot, he pulled out his fake badge again. It did not help, and it turns the minor charges of shoplifting and resisting a merchant into a... Resisting a merchant? What are all these weird terms that you have, America? Into a felony for impersonating an officer. The investigation into Leroy revealed that he'd been using his badge on the Hammock Dunes Bridge on a regular basis. A lot of people would learn their lesson from something like this. Leroy was able to immediately post bail, but the fear of conviction for his blatant felony did nothing to curb his behavior. 2 days after his initial arrest, he again flashed his fake badge at a toll collector on the bridge. How the fuck they didn't confiscate this badge? The toll collector responded by flashing the newspaper article about Leroy's arrest for impersonating an officer right back at him, which is a fucking baller move, to be honest. I don't think that's a job that has a lot of opportunities for mic drop moments, and this toll collector took full advantage when such an opportunity presented itself. Leroy paid the $2 and drove away, but the incident was reported to the police. Of course it was, because he was impersonating an officer again while he's out on bail for impersonating an officer. Leroy, no!
Leroy, you were just stupid as hell.
According to the local sheriff, quoting, 2 days after his release, and he is already up to his old tricks. We know already that he thinks he can get out of shoplifting and paying tolls with his fake badge, so I'm happy we were able to get him back off the streets before something more serious occurs.
At least I have chicken.
I don't think anything more serious was going to occur, to be honest, but this guy also needs to have some sort of punishment. I don't think it should be that severe, even though it's like a felony, and it is quite a serious crime. But he just needs to, like, spend a month in prison or something, or in jail, so that he doesn't do it again. He learns these consequences. He thinks he wants to be a cop, now he gets to see what it's like to be an inmate. Was that supposed to be a joke? I don't get it. It's weak. Following this second arrest, Leroy was unsurprisingly held without bail. We don't know what he got. Oh, what did he get in prison? Let me know, comments.
Get in the comments!
Maybe he's been tried by now. A Florida man kidnaps girlfriend for the second time. For 53-year-old Florida man Jeffrey Holly, 2024, should have given a unique lease on life. He had been convicted and gone to prison for kidnapping his girlfriend and for domestic violence against her. I mean, well, good. This is where he belongs. But after 2 years, the system deemed him fully rehabilitated and sent him on his way. Prisons, let me guess, this made him worse. And that way led right back to the house where he and his girlfriend lived together. I certainly have questions about this situation, especially since court documents sure make it seem like she had a restraining order on him at the time, but whatever. The couple lived together for 2 months, which I'm sure was just a delight, but finally Jeffrey's girlfriend said that she wanted to find somewhere else to live without him. The description of what allegedly followed is from the victim's statement. Anyway, according to her, Jeffrey didn't like the sound of her leaving, so he allegedly punched her in the face, stole her keys and phone, and then choked her unconscious.
Kill him!
You gotta go to prison for a long ass time. You were in prison for 2 years, this feels like 10 plus, mate. You gotta go to prison for 10 years. This is some crazy behavior. After that, he bound her feet together with duct tape and left her on the kitchen floor.
I'll kill him!
She was eventually allowed to do things like sit on the couch, use the bathroom, and sleep in their bed, but she was very much a prisoner. Wait, this continued? Okay, bro, we're talking like 25 to life now. Like, this is, I thought you did that and then left, which would be crazy, but you are keeping her as a prisoner. This is a whole different game, 25 to life. is what I hope for. Let's do that. After waking up the next morning, the victim was eventually able to get Jeffrey to give her back her keys after extensive begging. When she went to her car, it wouldn't start, so instead she tried to make a break for the neighbor's house. Jeffrey caught up to her, threw her to the ground, then dragged her back into the house where he tied her up with rope and duct tape. Then he tossed her in the garage. It's unclear from the statement whether neighbors saw any of this or merely heard a commotion and then started watching after the two were already inside, but neighbors did say they saw Jeffrey go to his truck, retrieve a bunch of zip ties, and then return to the garage. At that point, they called the police. Excellent work, neighbors! It's the neighborly thing to do. When police arrived, they heard the victim shouting for help from the garage. They said that she was bound so tightly that her wrists were turning purple. Officers also noted that she had injuries consistent with her other statements, such as a black eye. Jesus Christ, Jeffrey, you gotta go to prison forever, my dude, you f***ed up prick. Jeffrey attempted to run, jumping a fence and fleeing into the woods of a US Navy property. Big brain. Since he was resisting arrest, that meant it was time for some good old-fashioned police brutality. Yes! He dishes it out and he'll get it in return! Police brutality! Yes!
Get your hand off my penis!
It wasn't nearly as brutal as I would have liked since Jeffrey survived. He was white, after all. But rather than chase Jeffrey themselves, the police decided to release the hounds. To give you an idea of exactly how that went, allow me to share with you a not at all concerning quote from the sheriff. Here's a note to anybody who wants to break the law in Santa Rosa County in the future. If you hear a dog barking, our patrol dogs, we consider them kind of like Jack the Ripper with a fur coat. You want to obey the officer's commands because if you don't, you're going to the hospital like this individual did. I have mixed feelings about that statement from the sheriff. It's pretty intense. On the one hand, I'm glad that the dogs up Jeffrey pretty good, but on the other hand, I figure police dogs would have cuter, more subtle names like Officer Scruffy or Officer Patches. This is Officer Scruffy, this is Officer Patches, and this is Jack the Ripper. Who's gonna f*** up your day? Jack the Ripper just doesn't feel right. Anyway, Jeffrey is facing charges of at least domestic violence and possibly kidnapping, and hopefully he gets more than 2 years in prison this time. 25 to life! Florida man kidnaps ex-girlfriend for the second time. We're just doing brutal ones today, aren't we, Kevster? So, this is a pretty fucked up one, and I was a lot happier before I discovered it. Oh, thanks, Kevin. Way to ruin my Thursday. We've still got so many hours left in the day, Kevin. You're already ruining it. That last story took place in April 3 months ago. When I first saw the story, I put the headline into Google to find some news articles about the incident. However, the first thing that popped up wasn't from 3 months ago. It was from 3 days ago, but the time of writing. Probably like 6 months ago by the time you're finally seeing this, because at the time of recording, I don't think we've even actually launched Florida Man Fridays yet, and I'm already recording episode 6, because please work. I have faith in it. Come on. A completely unrelated person was also arrested for kidnapping his ex-girlfriend twice within the span of just over a month. So, what the actual f*** is going on in Florida? This time, it was 26-year-old Florida man Javonte Bell. Back in June, this Bell created a fake Snapchat account using the name of a mutual friend of his and his ex-girlfriend. She expressed concern to who she thought was a third party that Bell was going to kidnap her due to his history of violence. Clearly, she wasn't wrong. On June the 14th, the woman met up with her friend who was in on the plan. The friend explained that he agreed to help because he thought Bell just wanted to have a discussion with his ex about a child custody issue, but I'm not clear why he thought kidnapping was a good way to open this dialogue. Because he's a Florida man, Kevin. He's like, yeah, this'll work. This'll f***ing work! Anyway, once the woman was in the car, Bell then ran into the car and restrained her.
Castrate him!
They were driven to another location where Bell's trunk was waiting, and she was driven to his brother's house where they could all spend the night talking about relationship issues, whatever the fuck that means. This is insane, guys. The next morning, Bell's family came to the apartment, and while he was busy talking to them at the door, his victim was able to make her escape, albeit temporarily. A warrant was issued for Bell's arrest, but he wasn't actually picked up by the police yet. Barely a month later, wow, he was on the run for a month. In the early morning hours of July the 18th, witnesses saw Bell and an accomplice force the victim into a black Nissan. After an 18-hour manhunt, the car was finally tracked down and Bell was placed into custody. Bro, you go in prison a long time. Although we won't know yet because this was like 3 days ago. 3 months ago. Bell was then charged with armed kidnapping, battery, and 4 counts of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. Bro's going to prison a long time. Kidnapping's a proper crime, guys. You shouldn't be kidnapping people. Florida man arrested for a crime he didn't commit. That was an awful lot of kidnapping. So let's end today with something a bit lighter. Thank God. Like, kidnapping people is an assault. I don't like it, Kevin. This story begins back in 2014, but more accurately, it began back in 1992. In Texas in 1992, an arrest warrant was put out for a man by the name of David Sosa. He was wanted for selling crack, and he has managed to evade justice to this day. But not because nobody's looking for him. Fast forward to 2014, when then 44-year-old Florida man David Sosa was pulled over for a routine traffic stop. The officers ran David's name, at which point they discovered the 22-year-old outstanding warrant. Because remember, kids, the statute of limitations only limits how long prosecutors have to file charges. As long as charges were filed, those arrest warrants don't expire until you do. Ooh, I didn't know that. That's clever. This guy's probably roaming around being like, it's all good, baby. Statute of limitations. It's like, bro, you want it. It's different. Anyway, since police had a warrant for David Sosa, they decided it was only natural that David Sosa should be arrested and brought down to the station. This sort of makes sense, except for the reasons why it doesn't. I get the feeling they got the wrong David Sosa, right? For example, as David protested that they had the wrong person, it was discovered that this David Sosa had a different birthday, height, weight, and social security number than the man the warrant was out for. Did they just arrest a random dude called David Sosa? It can't be that uncommon of a name. This one also didn't have any tattoos, whereupon the warrant listed multiple identifying tattoos for the David that they were searching for. The dude's just shouting, "Leave me alone, I'm an accountant!" What the fuck? He's just like driving his generic grey sedan. He's wearing like a pocket protector. In an abundance of caution, I guess, the officers decided to take him down to the station and fingerprint him anyway. After 3 hours, the mix-up was sorted out and David was finally free to go. But like I said, those warrants don't expire, and David Sosa cannot be allowed to escape justice. As such, in 2018, the same David Sosa was pulled over again for another routine traffic stop. Again, officers put his name into a database and again... Oh, this is too good. They're doing it again. This 1992 warrant for selling crack came up. But this time, David was prepared. He had already gone through this once, so he knew all the ways that his personal information did not match up to the person in the warrant. Not only that, but he could point to his previous arrest in 2014 to indicate that this mistake had already happened to him once before. The fact that David was armed with all of this information to clear his name made his second arrest even more egregious than the first. They're like, yeah, we didn't know about that, David. That sounds like a cock and bull story to me, David. Get in the back of the car, you fucking crack-dealing bitch. This time, instead of spending 3 hours in a holding cell, David had to spend 3 days. He was locked up for an entire weekend, and it wasn't until the new week started that someone finally got around to comparing his fingerprints to the prints of the David Sosa that was actually listed on the warrant. Even worse, this wasn't in some other random part of Florida. It was the same county sheriff's office that had arrested him the first time. So David was left with no option but to sue the Martin County Sheriff's Office for wrongful arrests and for violating the 4th, 5th, and 14th Amendments. Wow. Okay, yeah, I mean, you got to. Like, I wouldn't say, I'm not a litigious person, but I would fucking sue them for this, because it's kind of outrageous, dudes. Perhaps I'll have to add a new theme to Florida Man Friday, which would be ending on stories that may go all the way to the Supreme Court. Probably not, though, because I doubt that's actually a sustainable goal. Yes, like, it's not that common. Anyway, the district court granted the defense's motion to dismiss the charges, so David had to take it to the 11th Circuit for the US Court of Appeals. But this time, he was going to have some help. There's something called an amicus curiae, more colloquially known as an amicus brief, which allows somebody that isn't party to a legal case to submit a statement to the court. These can be expert opinions, descriptions of relevant information that the party thought might not come up in trial, or really any information or insight that could have an impact on the case. I learned something new today. These are more common in trials that are either of broad public interest or have extremely far-reaching legal ramifications. The help that David Sosa received came in the form of an amicus brief from the non-profit organization the Institute for Justice, along with their 4 co-authors for the brief: cardiologist David Sosa, I see where this is going. Supervisory Program Assistant for the USDA, David Sosa, construction company owner, David Sosa, and University of Miami law student, David Sosa. That's right, it turns out that 5 out of the 5 David Sosas agreed that you should not be able to lock someone up in jail for 3 days just because their name is David Sosa. According to the brief, there are potentially 1,000 or more David Sosas living in the US, but only one that is wanted in Texas for selling crack. They state the Florida man's multiple arrests are evidence that any person named David Sosa runs the risk of being locked up for days at a time if an inept cop runs a warrant check during a routine traffic stop. How could this be? What if someone called John Smith has a warrant out for them? Or like Peter blogs. Like, what's going on?
How dare get your hands off me.
The Court of Appeals overruled the district court's dismissal of the case, instead claiming that David had a valid due process claim. However, upon reviewing the case, they decided that David had failed to show that his constitutional rights had been violated. Basically, they argued that because David was arrested due to the existence of a valid warrant, even if none of that information on the warrant matched the person they arrested except the name, that wasn't a constitutional violation. That's really shitty. He deserves some money. It's an embarrassment for Florida law enforcement, and it truly frightens me that people who are that stupid are given badges and guns, but the court held that David's arrest constituted a reasonable mistake on the part of the police. Sure, maybe one time. Not twice. However, the Institute for Justice and the Coalition of Davids are arguing that these arrests were a reckless mistake, not a reasonable one. And honestly, it's really hard to disagree with that logic. Admittedly, though, I'm really sad that the Florida man that was falsely arrested was 44 years old at the time of his arrest. His age wasn't listed in the majority of reporting, and it took a surprising amount of time for me to find it, but that whole time I was searching, I was praying that he was only like 30 years old or something. The story's already ridiculous, but imagine how more insane it would have been if a 30-year-old David Sosa was arrested for a 22-year-old warrant for selling crack. Anyway, the US Court of Appeals made their ruling last year, and the case is currently being pushed to the Supreme Court. Holy shit. Whether or not the Supreme Court will actually hear the case, that's a different story, and given how this year's been going, I suspect they may feel they have a lot more important things to do right now, even if those more important things are a luxury vacation with Harlan Crow. I don't get the reference, Kevster. That's where we end today's video. Thanks for watching. Police brutality, yes!